missing a light here. That's the pasty boy we know and love. Or at least know. Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm wearing a hat with a bear on it. And I'm a little underwhelmed by the Switch 2 reveal, not gonna lie. I was really hoping for something more along the lines of like when the original Switch debuted, with like a big presentation and a bunch of games. But I guess Nintendo needed to do its best to get out ahead of the leaks because, I mean, we really didn't see anything in this video that we haven't already seen. Except apparently footage of a new Mario Kart game that I legit thought was just Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That series really needs to try something different. But anyway, as a JRPG fan, it occurred to me that even though we don't have any release dates or confirmed games, there are a bunch of JRPGs that are definitely going to be hitting the Switch 2 at launch. Like, it's gotta happen. I'm going to be focusing specifically on games that don't currently have a Switch 1 version too, so I'm sure the list will be even longer if we were to get into games that will get a new version with enhanced graphics, that sort of thing. So, further ado, we don't want you here. Get out of here. Let's do it. This seems like a gimme, right? The JRPG of the year that completely skipped launching on the hottest selling console pretty much ever. So yes, definitely Atlus has a version of Metaphor waiting in the wings, ready to go live when the Switch 2 hits shelves. They'd be crazy not to, right? Metaphor is the latest from the Persona developers, taking all the lessons they've learned from making one incredible series and using that to launch a brand new one. It incorporates a mix of turn-based and action combat too, which I really hope becomes a thing that more games do. I love it in Trails Through Daybreak, and I'm glad it's here too. If you've been a Switch-only gamer and you missed Metaphor the first time around, then you absolutely will want to grab this when it launches. Definitely, without a doubt, on the Switch 2 this year. Visions of Mana is the glorious resurrection of the Mana series on modern platforms, and I personally loved every minute of it. I'll post a link to my review down in the video description so you can check that out if you're skeptical, but man, this was one beautiful, colorful, heartful game. And it's a ton of fun to play on top of all that. I was initially kind of surprised this skipped the Switch, but after giving it some thought, I kind of see why. The world of Visions of Mana is so gorgeous, I have to imagine the developers were loath to compress it down into a version that could run on the, frankly, ancient Switch hardware. Like, that processor was kind of old when the thing came out 9 years ago. I can only imagine how frustrating that must be for developers trying to work with it. Still, a game that skips the Switch skips out on a ton of revenue, so you better believe they've got an enhanced version ready to go for the Switch 2 at launch. If you're at all interested in action RPGs, or if you're nostalgic for Secret of Mana, this one is definitely worth your time, and if you want to wait for the Switch 2 version, I don't blame you at all. The fact that we never saw Final Fantasy VII Remake on the Switch is a little odd. I mean, yeah, the Switch would probably struggle to run it, but crazier games have been ported to the Switch with decent results. I'm sure it was a mixture of Square Enix's timed exclusivity with Sony and hardware deficiencies that kept it from happening. And of course, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would never have flown on the Switch. That's a bridge too far. But the Switch 2, hey, the exclusivity is over, so there's no reason not to push these bad boys out on the Switch 2. Remake should run perfectly, and Rebirth should only need some minor compromises, which most gamers aren't going to care about. If you're a graphics hound, you're going to be picking it up on Steam to play on your new 5090 or whatever the heck graphics card is hot right now. So for everyone else, especially people who aren't interested in the PlayStation 5 for whatever reason, Switch 2 sounds like the perfect home for the first two parts of the trilogy. And heck, while we're at it, let's get part 3 on there too, huh? Why not? While we're on the topic of Final Fantasy and expired exclusivity, let's talk about Final Fantasy XVI too. I mean Final Fantasy XVI as well, not some unannounced Final Fantasy XVI sequel, just to be clear. We're clear? We're clear. This was an extremely divisive entry for a lot of reasons. Some would argue, persuasively, that it's not even really a JRPG, it's a straight-up action game. Some would say it feels way too Western to fall in line with the rest of the series. Some would even try and say that Torgal is not a good boy, which is objectively absurd because Torgal is a very good boy.
Yes, he is. He's a good boy. He's such a good boy. And you're a good boy.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Anyway, the point is, Final Fantasy XVI did not perform at the level Square Enix hoped. Part of that is down to its PS5 exclusivity, of course, and releasing this on the Switch 2 day one is a great way to help mitigate some of that pain. It might not be everyone's favorite Final Fantasy, but it's a solid action game with a moving story and pretty beautiful visuals too. Imagine being able to play it on the go. That's pretty sweet if you think about it. The Like a Dragon series is the new hotness. It's honestly a natural evolution of the Yakuza series because those games were already JRPGs, they just didn't wear it on their sleeves. But starting with Yakuza Like a Dragon and continuing on to Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, there's no disguising their JRPG-ness anymore. And since these games were never on Switch, now's the perfect time to bring them out. You know RGG has these all set to go, and I'm sure they have a nice version of the upcoming Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii coming too. In this industry, you can't rely on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC to carry your game, for better or worse. You have to cut Nintendo in, or you're just not going to be making as much as you could. So will we see a Yakuza Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth double pack? Yes, we definitely will. Clair Obscur is one of my most anticipated releases for the year, which is huge, considering everything coming out in 2025. It was announced at an Xbox showcase, which was my first surprise. As a JRPG guy, I usually don't pay attention to Xbox announcements, since traditionally, there hasn't been much there for me. That's starting to change, of course, since they've also been partnering with Atlas, but anyway, I digress. This is an absolutely gorgeous looking JRPG from a French studio. The voice cast is absolutely stacked with talent, and it's turn-based with time button presses. It's basically a recipe for success. Throw in a really intriguing plot concept, and I'm there day one. Naturally, one console was conspicuously absent from the marketing materials for this game, and that's the Nintendo Switch 2. And that's obviously because they weren't allowed to mention it. So there is definitely a version of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 coming to the Switch 2. And I know I said this was a video about JRPGs that would definitely be coming at launch for the Switch 2, but I guess this one could be an exception. After all, we don't know exactly when the Switch 2 is launching, so it could be that it doesn't hit at launch because no version of the game will be ready yet. But I have a feeling they'll be able to get this one out in good time, so I don't think we'll be waiting long. What other JRPGs do you think are coming to the Switch 2? Keep in mind, if a game is already on the Switch, it'll naturally play on the Switch 2 more than likely, which is why I avoided talking about games that are already on the Switch that might receive upgraded versions. With that in mind, do we think those upgraded versions will be made available digitally for free? Some PlayStation 5 games did that. And also, are there other games that might benefit from a Switch 2 sales bump? I'm thinking games that maybe didn't perform well on other current-gen systems, like Forspoken, for example. Maybe a definitive version of that comes out and does well. Or maybe they just want to bury that one, I don't know. I've heard mixed things. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, if you would consider liking the video and subscribing if you're not already, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thanks everyone, and until next time, bye. I'm sure it was a mixture of Square Enix's timed exclusivity with Tony. I'm sure it was a mixture of Square Enix's timed exclusivity with Tony. Get me out of here.